Hi there, welcome to my channel. In this video, we are doing a little bit of a different one, and we have cast a horary chart today for the question of who will win the US presidential elections. And in horary astrology, we basically use a traditional technique for asking questions, looking at the planets at the moment that the question is asked, and then finding an answer for that said question by giving every single planet a certain actor and seeing how the actors interact in the chart. So I asked a question today, so it's November 4th, 2024, and I have used my location, which is Bucharest, Romania, and also my local time, which is 3:39 p.m. when I'm asking the question. Now, in horary astrology, you can use a number of house systems. The one that I personally work with is going to be Regiomontanus. This is one of the unequal house systems that is commonly used for horary charts. And what we're going to do as a very first step is we're going to identify what are the planets, aka the actors, for the important people in the situation. So the very first thing that we do in who will win type of question horary analysis is we look at the first house, which is going to be the person that the querent, aka the person asking the question, wants to win. So naturally, because I don't live in the US, but in my own personal preference, I am someone who weights towards Kamala Harris. So the first house will be attributed to her. And the first house starts in Aries. So because Aries is a zodiac sign that is ruled by Mars, we're going to see that Mars will represent Kamala Harris. Let me just change this. I'm going to change this to pink. So this is going to be Kamala. And then the seventh house, which is going to be the opponent, will represent Donald Trump. The seventh house starts in Libra. Libra is ruled by Venus, so Donald Trump is going to be represented by Venus in Sagittarius. The next actor that we care about is going to be the public. Now, the public generally can be represented by either the 11th house ruler, because the 11th house is the people, the social media, how the general population views these candidates. So in this situation, the 11th house starts in Capricorn. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. So the public is going to be represented by Saturn. And then also the moon can represent in horary astrology how the situation will evolve, and then also it can represent where the public vote is going to go to. So the moon is also going to be another indicator for how the situation will evolve and who will be voted for. The very first thing that we want to see is naturally, what are the conditions of these two planets, of Kamala's planet and Trump's planet. So when we look at Kamala Harris's Mars is at 0 degrees in Leo, so it has just very recently switched zodiac signs. It had been in Cancer, where it was in its fall, so she has had a period of time that wasn't quite comfortable for her. We could say one where her status could have gone down, her pulse could have gone down, or where she generally felt some level of discomfort. But Mars is peregrine in Leo. That means it doesn't have any particular dignity. It's not in domicile, it's not in fall, detriment, or exaltation. So we're going to say that Mars is neutral in the zodiac sign of Leo. However, Mars also falls in the 5th house, which is neither an angular house nor a cadent house. It's in a succedent house. And succedent houses are, again, quite neutral. They're not necessarily good, they're not necessarily bad. So we're just going to say that Kamala's situation has recently improved, but it's a very recent change. She's not feeling particularly strong, she's not feeling particularly weak, she is neutral. When we're looking at Donald Trump's planet, we see a very similar situation. Venus is in Sagittarius, which again, it doesn't have any particular dignity for, And Venus is also in the 9th house. Now, the 9th house is a weaker house than the 5th house. The 9th house is going to be a cadent house, and the stronger houses are going to be the 1st, 4th, 7th, and the 10th, which are the angular houses. And then in the order of strength, we then have the succeedent ones, the 2nd, 5th, 8th, and 11th. And then the most weak houses are going to be the 12th house, first of all, but also the 9th house, the 6th house, and the 3rd house. So if we look at this from an initial standpoint, we would say that Kamala has a little bit of an advantage in terms of their positions, because their individual planets are in zodiac signs that they don't have a dignity for, but Kamala's house placement is slightly better. However, this is not enough for us to understand who's going to win and who's not. When we want to see who's going to win and who's not going to win, we have to take into account the people voting. And the people voting, again, are going to be indicated by Saturn and the moon. Now, in order to understand this, we have to look at the zodiac signs that these planets fall in and to see whether there are any receptions of any kind between the candidates' planets and then the population's planets. So when we look at, let me pick a color. So let's look first of all at Kamala's planet. Mars in Leo, and then we have Saturn in Pisces. Saturn, if we were to look at Saturn in Leo, Saturn is it's in detriment in Leo. So that means that Kamala has a rejection for the public here. When we look at it from the other way around, we have Mars in Pisces. Mars doesn't have any particular dignity in Pisces, so this is a neutral connection. But there's just enough to say that between the planet that represents the population and the planet that represents Kamala, there is one rejection that is happening caused by a detriment connection. So it interestingly comes from Kamala's planet. It could be the case that Kamala has a frustration with the public, or that Kamala has something that is not good for the public. But nevertheless, usually these things are being felt, even though it doesn't necessarily come from Saturn's zodiac sign. So it could be the case that this is something that negatively impacts her candidacy. When we look at the moon falls in Sagittarius, and again, Mars in Leo. So we look at the other planetary indicator for the population. The moon in Sagittarius, so we look at Mars in Sagittarius. There isn't any connection here, so Mars doesn't have any dignity here. And then we look at the moon in Leo. The moon in Leo doesn't have any dignity again. So these planets don't see each other in any way. Awesome. The next thing that we want to see is whether Kamala's planet is going to form an aspect of any kind with the population's planets. So that being said, does Mars and Saturn form any aspect, or does the moon and Mars form any aspect? Well, Mars and Saturn are in zodiac signs that don't see each other, first of all. So naturally, they can't make an aspect. This would be an inconjunction, maybe if Mars was at 12 degrees in Leo, but even then, we don't take inconjunctions into account. So no aspect connecting Mars and Saturn. Sometimes, other times, we want to see if there's an indirect aspect happening. So if Mars connects to something that can connect to Saturn, but everything that connects Saturn to the other planets, it doesn't connect back to Mars. So because of that, Mars is actually disconnected from Saturn altogether. When we look at Mars and the moon, again, the moon doesn't form any aspects to Mars, and it doesn't form any aspects indirectly either, because Mars could only go to Mercury through this trine. It could go through Pluto through an opposition, or it could go through a trine to Neptune. When we look at applying aspects, actually, there aren't any applying aspects to Mars. All of them are separating, aka they have happened in the past already, and now Mars is moving away from these aspects, which is weird. Namely, the closest aspect that we see here is Mars in opposition to Pluto, which not only has Mars left Cancer, which is a zodiac sign that's been pretty weak for it, but actually it opposes Pluto, which is the planet of transformation, death, and rebirth. So I would say it's either something very damaging that happened to her, or it's something that has really changed her position like last minute before the elections, but there's definitely something that has changed her status. Now let's look at Trump. Let's see if Trump's planet connects better with any of these indicators. And the very first thing that we notice is that naturally the moon falls in Sagittarius, and Venus also falls in Sagittarius. So the population's planet and Donald Trump's planet both fall in the same zodiac sign. And the moon, so that naturally puts them in a mutual reception. And also the moon is in an applying conjunction to Venus. So there's also an aspect being formed. And the moon moves very quickly. So naturally the moon is a planet that we look for in any horary to see how the situation evolves. So even if this were a normal horary that we would read, we would say the situation evolves towards him or towards his odds. So yeah, this is already a very positive vote. Usually when you ask questions like these, aspects are the very first thing that you want to notice. The second thing is you want to see if there are any receptions that are happening between the planets. And the third thing is you would look at the individual's planet's house placement and zodiac sign placement and whether they feel comfortable in that sign or not. So we've established that individually, Kamala is actually a stronger candidate, but when it comes to the US population's connection to the candidates, we actually only have the moon connecting here with Venus in this applying conjunction. We also have Saturn. Let's see if Saturn forms any connection with Venus, and we do see there's a square that is happening. Now this is a separating square, so Venus and Saturn have formed a square about 5 units of time ago. It's a separating aspect, but just because we already have an applying aspect, that's enough. We don't need this to be an applying one as well for this sensor to be affirmative in his favor. Also, furthermore, Saturn falls in Pisces, and Venus is exalted in the zodiac sign of Pisces. So Venus is exalted in Saturn's zodiac sign. That means that there's an exaltation that the public has about Donald Trump. Exaltation is usually when there is an infatuation almost. It's like, think of Venus in Pisces. Venus in Pisces also is quite an idealistic placement. So that's why Venus is exalted in the zodiac sign. It's when there's something exaggerated, like an appreciation that is exaggerated, that's not always rooted in reality. So naturally, this means that the population really likes him. For some reason, they do really like him. But there's also like a warning from the universe, or, you know, from the system that we're interpreting from, that this infatuation is not necessarily rooted in facts or reality, but rather it's an illusion that people have. They have been hyped up basically to really like him. For example, if you were to ask a question that is of a romantic nature, and you would see a person's planet in the exaltation sign of the other, we would say that that other person really loves, for some reason, this person, although they don't necessarily deserve that love, or maybe there's something hidden that they're not seeing, but they do really want the other person. Anyway, so yeah, exaltation from Saturn sign. So the population really likes Donald Trump in an exalted way. Also, the other planet for the population is in the same zodiac sign, so aligned with the visions of Donald Trump. And then when we look at Kamala's planet, it is disconnected. It is really disconnected from the population's planet. So naturally, this would mean that the answer is Donald Trump will win the elections. That's the 7th house ruler here. And it also comes up in 5 units of time, 21 minus 16. We would say that in either 5 days or 5 hours, or the election happens on November 5th. It could also be this one over here, this interpretation, but there's something about 5 that is significant for the win. So hope you enjoyed that. You enjoyed this analysis. Have any questions or any suggestions for future videos, let me know. And hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.